Alrighty, so a couple things I want to say real quick of how much my improvising skills seem to work out for me. I first started this off to be called Episode 5 The Gauntlet, as in, like, this was meant to be Centaurus' training video on how to become a vampire. Like, I was going to focus this on him and have Cecilia sort of in the background. But this ended up turning it to be Cecilia's story. I mean, as a storyteller, there's so many things you hear about from, like, people that do this sort of shit. The story takes its own path, and holy shit, it does. I mean, like I said, I wanted this to be Centaurus' story about his sort of bloodlust, his pain threshold, him trying to at least somewhat get a grasp on his vampireness, and it ended up being Cecilia's story pretty much. He still has his training there, but like I said, 90% of this is Cecilia's story. I changed it so many times. I changed it from the Gauntlet to the Trial of Fire to then just the Dark Knight. I mean, it ended up being her story. That's essentially what it became. With this, I really wanted, I do go back into the past, like the night of the wedding or the early morning of the next day. By this time, Ragni has been critically wounded and Serana has been killed, but they don't know that because they're out in the wild. And the idea of the next episode of them will be to obviously keep that sort of happening in the background. They're not in civilized world. They're not going to hear anything for a long time. They'll have their doubts and this sort of stuff. But yeah, it's I thought about time skips in the next one. I have a really good idea for a time skip where I can push it forward so we can get kind of into the contractors storyline. But yeah, I really wanted to continue just telling the story as it goes. I don't want to do a massive time jump and you miss out on so much of it. I thought, the best is to see their characters, especially when it comes to Centaurus' first night and day as a vampire. It's a very important sort of thing. It's a transition from who he was to what he's become. And again, it's not just that, but it's also Cecilia's story. Funny enough, I'm going to let you guys know that Cecilia is my favourite character. And I don't even like vampires. I'm more of a werewolf guy, and I'm more of a male player-centric sort of guy. But Cecilia is my favourite character out of all of them, even above my own guy, Centaurus here. I mean, she is by far my favourite. I love her. She's just a cranky bitch, and I just love her story. But yeah, it kind of became hers. Now, the start of this kind of sounds a bit stupid because I'm trying to mix around voices here and have like the AI for Centaurus kind of sound a bit more blood-crazed, a bit more demonic sort of sounding. I think it was a bit shit, personally. But I kind of really want to stress that sort of, that bloodlust, like, I want vampires to feel like sharks when they smell blood, when they hear heartbeats. Then my mind goes from just normal to like just bloodthirsty, kill everything. Kind of like how vampires are in the Van Helsing Netflix series, how like they inherently become evil. Like their dark side takes control. And that's kind of how I want it to be with Centaurus and any other vampire, that it's that control to not feed into your darkness, like all the blood, like the smell of blood to Centaurus when he was a soldier was disgusting. It was filth, it smelt gross, it was, it's like licking a coin, for crying out, it's gross. But now the smell excites him, it rouses him, it rouses all of them. Not in the sort of going to flop one out and start beating it off. Just more than that, you want to keep tearing people apart, ripping them. It's not just the thirst, it's also the bloodlust on pain and carnage and darkness. I want these guys to feel like creatures of Molag Bal. It's not just they physically change, but they're also internally changed. That fragment of who they were still remains within them, and if they can hold on to it, they can stay somewhat good. If they can't, then they become just a ravaged beast, a sort of creature that just rides in domination. That sort of thing. And we have this with Centaurus, where he has killed people before as a vampire, the Molag Bal cultist, but this one he's kind of given his own charge, and he just goes batshit crazy. He's just killing anything he can find. He's using his new magic. Centaurus was never a bloody mage, but now he's got access to this very powerful dark magic, which is Serana's sort of help here, and he's killing these guys. I had no idea these guys had silver until I killed them, which kind of takes homage to where they go after this, to the next of where Cecilia goes, because it's actually right near a companion's quest line place, but you got to go and kill the Silver Hand. I think it's to find one of the fragments of Uthrag, which is awesome because it kind of feels like these guys raided that place and then took all the gear down to this place, which makes sense. But I still wanted to kind of put the Silver Hand into perspective. With this, he charges at her, and I should have just used a bat charge to get to it, but then he stops. The whole humanity sort of thing kicks in, where he's kind of bouncing between himself and what he's become, and he's hearing a heartbeat, he's seeing the blood flow. It's just he's in sort of kill, don't kill mode. And he sees, fragments of Sigurd and fragments of Luca, and he turns around. And that's when Cecilia's coming down. They've just attacked the top of the fort, found the bandit, and found out that, I think it goes every single time I do a video. He's just, they've stopped, they've come to try and stop him, and he's been able to pull back, luckily for her, Botti, or how the hell you say her name, blah, blah, blah. And it's his first redeeming mark, that from the very first night of being a vampire, and he was able to pull back and not slaughter them. Because imagine the power and the bloodlust and the hunger and all that shit kicking at you, and you hear a heartbeat, and you feel the sweat and you feel the blood and all that sort of stuff, and it's just like you'd be completely just high as a kite on blood right now. And being able to stop that shows that he's got some serious potential on being somewhat like Cecilia. But Cecilia isn't really, she's not a vampire and how to train somebody. I mean, Sarita is mostly what she is because of her, because she has the will and the temperament and the sort of kindness. I like to see Sarita as the vampire with a soul or with a heart. She didn't let her monster side take over. It's like her humanity still stayed intact. Where Cecilia obviously has been around for a long time. It's kind of it's turned her into a sort of a blunt stone under the water, and Centauros is brand new and fresh to it. So it's a bit of a old vampire, new vampire. But luckily for Centauros, that Sarita's there because, again, Sarita's a very good vampire. She's kind and compassionate, which is very rare. It kind of goes against the entire thing I'm trying to build. That's kind of what I wanted with Sarita. I wanted her to be somewhat of the passionate kind, sort of the bounce between bad cop, good cop, especially with these two, and her story. She was a side character made long ago. It was a very boring episode to make until I had to break it and turn it to something serious. But again, Sarita is a very fun character of mine. I definitely want to give her some more story later on with all that. Now this bit here, I've always wanted to do a little Helgen thing, because unfortunately a good 99% of the mods that have alternate starts destroy Helgen, unless this alternate perspective has Helgen alive. And I really wanted to add one of the Helgen prisoners to be here, which would recognise Centauros even in his pale state. And that's obviously the male Nord preset 1. That's him, and just a bit modified with a beard and a few scars. But who knows, one day we might venture back into the Helgen scene that's brought up in the next episode or a couple episodes later, since I got it actually working. We might actually see this prisoner and Centauros back in the series, which would be kind of pretty cool. But yeah, it's just kind of like the bandit leader they call it here at the top of the fort. So as you can see, Sarita and Cecilia have done some work before when he was down there slaughtering the vampires. And he finds some unique gear, some ebony sort of infused shield. I kind of regret making him black. I should have made him just the ordinary green color and then made him black later on, because there's something I want to do for Cecilia. I want to upgrade her in the next episode. So that's something I want to do with that. But again, I can still somewhat kind of do that with different pieces. That maybe these two are ebony, where the boots and the chest plate and the helmet are of the old vanilla green or something along that. But this is kind of obviously going to be Centauros' new armor. This is the kind of armor that I wanted him to have for the thumbnail. But then it became quite evident much later on that this is more Cecilia's story than it was his. So I thought, nah, we'll have Cecilia at the front of it because he got the last one. So Cecilia gets this one. It's going to be her story, most likely, and that sort of stuff. Now, again, Cecilia is not the sort of person that ever spares people. She spared Topher as a bandit because of that weird thing they all share amongst each other, that sort of fourth sense of their destiny infused with the Dragonborn. She doesn't know Topher's dead at the moment, But it's going to be interesting to see what happens when it finds out. And this is kind of when I was probably going to show a bit of it off, but man, time just slipped away from me, and a lot of it happens with what happens real soon, with them just sensing and smelling the fort being attacked. I mean, I wanted that to be like a little sequence, and then it blew out of control, and yeah. Now, Imperial Fort gets attacked, and Cecilia's like, holy shit, we better go and help him out. But she can't take Centaurus with her because she doesn't know if he's going to be okay around Imperial soldiers, and plus, they could recognize him. So she tells him to stay here, and the bandit's like, please don't, and we can kind of see why he was like that. I mean, Cecilia knew what he was going to do. She wanted him to fail in this regard, but she didn't give two shits about the bandit. I mean, he's scum. He's a bandit piece of shit. She doesn't give two craps for their life. But she can't have Centaurus with her because it is an Imperial fort and he could be recognised, since a bandit recognised him. And, of course, he's still bloodthirsty. He could go from killing bandits to then striking down Imperial soldiers. So she's told him to wait here. If he moves, she'll kill him, sort of thing. And even threatened to butcher him with killing the bandit. But this is kind of where the story takes a pivot. And I mean, I thought it'd be a little bit cool to have something nearby, kind of feel a bit more authentic to the story. And I guess it did. It did. It felt a lot... You know, that's kind of the way life goes in a way. And I want the story to feel grounded. And sometimes your plan just goes out the window and shit just happens. And this is one of those things where the story just takes a pivot to the left turn and goes off in the same direction. And she's come to this fort and the Draga are attacking, and he's a strong Draga. They're attacking the Imperial forces and this sort of stuff. And it's a combat sequence. I do like combat sequences. They're a lot of fun. But yeah, the story just went off and did its own thing. And for me, it feels a lot more grounded. It feels, you know, if you write a story on a piece of paper and you follow it through, it's going to feel fake. Because, again, life has no plan. And your life is pretty much a story. So, I took that with this and was like, fucking, let's just wing it and see what happens. Again, I wanted this to get to, like, a certain mark before I finished it. And I went, like, probably 19 minutes over what I wanted. And this is why this episode's so long, because this sequence right here. But it also played into Cecilia's story. I mean, a lot of us know who she was, that she was an Imperial soldier back in the Oblivion Crisis, and then when she became a vampire, she became this legend of the Dark Knight throughout Skyrim, and the Wraith of the Reachman, and maybe the Dark Vigil or the Vigilance, and other nicknames like that. And, you know, she was just known as a legend and a boogeyman and that sort of thing amongst the locals. And with that, I really wanted it to be, you know, that there was a lot of truth to that legend. But when she helped people out, she disappeared. You know, she was a figment. She wasn't a actual like person people saw. It was just a legend. You know, a dark shadow in the night that saved their lives, and this and that. But this one with her that she's now with the Dragonborn, she can now kind of show herself. She can kind of reveal who she is, you know, instead of having to disappear at night in fear of getting lit on fire, people finding out what she is, and having the vigilance chase her, and having to kill more hunters, or eventually be outnumbered, or this and that. She's able to, now that she's an established member of Team Dragonborn, she's able to show the world who she is. Now, obviously, this is a couple hours after of the Red Wedding, and so news hasn't gotten around yet because the shock value is still pretty much raw. Hell, even the contractor's probably halfway. He's probably just got back home from his assassination of Vittorio Vici. So none of this kind of knows what's happened just yet, and that's kind of why I had this spot right here, because I can do it right now, because it'd make no sense if I did this 3 days later, because they'd find out, obviously, what's happened to the Dragonborn. That's going to be news that spreads like wildfire. So here it felt adequate, you know, saved from the Draga, since now Cecilia was in Morthal. She knows what's happened and all that sort of stuff, and just they decide to help, because what other choice they've got? It's either let the Draugr slaughter people in innocence, or... Because the reason the Draugr are doing this, because the Civil War has been stopped, right? And the souls aren't going to Sovngarde as a frequent rate as that they were in the past. So now Alduin has ordered his dragons to start resurrecting his priests, and priests resurrecting the undead. But all the priests have been killed by Minerva. We'll get into that in a few episodes later. But they're resurrecting the dead so they can go and kill the dead. And it could be a thing where if they're killed by the dragon, no matter what race they are, their soul goes to Sovngarde to feed Alduin. It could be a thing like that, or it could just be that they're sending the Nords back to the dead. But as we see, Cecilia here is sort of not disappearing like she would have, and she's actually, it's not just that for her. This part of her story is, it's kind of reminding her of the Oblivion Crisis, when she stood side by side with other Imperial soldiers in the end times, in dangerous times where things were just unnaturally dangerous, and she kind of feels like a magnet, being drawn towards it. This right here, we actually seen her husband before, and I'm pretty sure we actually see him again, because I'm pretty sure I recorded. Yes, we did. As the reader walks right past him, in Whiterun. So if you can spot that, who he is, then congratulations. But he's also been in the previous stories as a certain intelligence agent, I guess you could say. But anyway, we meet her and they're having a conversation, and she's trying to rally her troops up who've just been butchered and slaughtered by the undead armies, not expecting any sort of attack. And a lot of them are badly injured and wounded, but they can still walk. And then she's trying to rile them up, and they're like, dude, we just got absolutely butchered, there's nothing we can do. And Cecilia, for some reason, just decides to open her mouth and offer aid to these soldiers. She speaks up, and this is kind of her falling back into place of who she was so long ago as a sort of Imperial commander. Because she starts off quite young. She's not even an Imperial soldier in the Oblivion Crisis. She is. She's just completed her training, but she's never served. She was on the way to Solstheim's Imperial fort. I was going to reveal that way too early, but just the night before she left. She never really served in the front line until, again, the Oblivion Crisis, where she became sort of a commander of Imperial soldiers that were scattered, had their squads and entire commands destroyed by the Daedra. And again, this is kind of her falling back into place, and it takes a lot for her to be able to go like, okay, I'm not the dragon anymore. And she takes the helmet off, and you physically see her face. And it's not her hiding behind a mortal mask like she normally would around town. It's her showing her proper, pale vampire face. And after what you've just been through with the Draga, you would drop a brick in your jeans 100%. A blood-sucking vampire, a creature of nightmare, a corpse-like looking fucking thing. It doesn't matter if it was solid, it'd certainly be running down your jeans. It doesn't matter. And these people look at her and they're like, holy fuck, and they're freaking out, and this orc freaks out, it's a vampire, and it's a combination of who she was, what she is, and these guys are like, it's a fucking vampire, burn it. And then one of the commanders goes, if you dickheads don't know, Zarita opens her lips up here, she's like, you guys wouldn't stand a chance even with the numbers you've got, because I want Cecilia to be an absolute badass. Can you imagine finding there's another vampire standing behind you in black armor? You'd freak out. And that's what they're doing. They're freaking out. They're like, oh shit, there's one behind us. They're surrounded us. But eventually it takes their commander sort of telling him who she is. And then obviously when you find out that this isn't just some vampire, this is the companion to the Dragonborn. This is someone that's fought dragons. It kind of definitely builds you back up, and she offers to have him follow her into the darkness so she can see, so she can hear, and she can be their eyes and their smell and their hearing, to basically save Dornstar, because a large section of them pushed through. A section of them stayed back to kill the soldiers, but the rest of them went back to attack Dornstar. I'm going to see any cultists in this one, because I don't want the cult to be too big, because I do not want to fuck around with something I can't control as a storyteller. And I want it to be small, like it's not like some Mythic Dawn shit where they're implanted everywhere throughout Skyrim. It's a very small beginning to the cult. So they're not going to be here yet, and I don't know exactly how I'm going to do that. I mean, I'll just improvise that shit like I do everything else. Hopefully it works, because it seemed to work here, hopefully. But like I said, Cecilia kind of marches these guys into the dark. She's their eyes and their ears and their nose into this sort of stuff, while she leaves Centaurus behind with the bandit. She obviously knows what he's going to do to the bandit, but she doesn't give a flying shit because it's a bandit. There's some things, people change throughout their life and their stories, but some things don't change. It's just some things can't change, I don't think Cecilia, even when she's done in this heroic journey, if she lives through it, would sit down and go, maybe I should spare some more bandits. Because she spared one with Topher, like I said, but I don't think that's kind of the way she is. She's not the sort of person that would spare bandits, you know. Don't really imagine that's something they should ever do. But again, it's kind of like I said, it's really bringing it back to a days where, you know, it was, instead of fighting the undead, it was fighting Daedra, and, you know, running on the roads with no plan, no clear plan, just taking a bunch of soldiers, running into a town to save it from a Daedric attack, and stuff like this is kind of really bringing back deja vu for her, you know. And she's gotten quite a bit of that already with Morphal and fighting alongside the Dragonborn, but it's kind of when I want to wake the Draga up. Not just the Draga, but any sort of thing that's undead. Could be zombies. I mean, you know, just because the Draga are going to get woken up first, but any undead that get killed, any skeletons they find, are obviously going to pay homage to their the thing. Even though dragons aren't big on necromancy, unless it was that one from the Dawnguard DLC. But then again, the Dragon Priests are all necromancers. They're all these guys, I think, were actually like liches before Menomako was. I think. I don't know. I haven't 100% checked that yet. And then something cool I want to do with those dragon masks that Minerva had occupied, and kind of maybe might have been, you know, borrowed again by certain individuals. But yeah, I definitely really want to forget what I was saying. Show off the sort of the Dragon Priest in the future. I mean, this is just a dragon attack. I don't need it to be everywhere and everything, and have a Dragon Priest absolutely everywhere. Because as you see, it's not snowing. It's not a blizzard. And I kind of want that to be Dragon Priest orientated. We get to see a couple vampires here. The only thing I wish I would have added was their helmets, because I didn't actually have helmets from at that time. Didn't actually make them. I'd make them later, but they were there. I mean, both of them were there, which was amazing, because I did kind of want to do something with other vampires in this episode. And I had them walk past me while I was setting up shop for that Centaurus attacking the fort sort of thing. And this is, I guess, where they came. I made them ages ago. Made them yonks ago, and this is just where they rocked up, which was cool. Because I've set up many different AI paths of NPCs waltzing around at night time that are vampires and travelling during the day as mortals, sort of thing. And they rocked up there, and it was just a natural part of storytelling, which works out quite a bit in this story. And that's just rude, isn't it? Just getting put an ice bug in the back. But yeah, I definitely did want to introduce some sort of new vampire sort of thing into the story. You know, it wasn't just going to be a training for Centaurus and a story for Cecilia, but kind of new routes maybe being made. Because we've got a couple of vampires. Cecilia did find one of our old friends who was that sort of enchantress sort of chick that would sleep with people for blood or enchant weapons for blood, but she ended up getting turned to ash by Elderween. Then we've got a couple from the Mages Guild, a mercenary that is in the rift with the other vampire that was from the Mages Guild. So there's not many of them. Obviously, you know, with the current, my God, I'm sorry about that blurriness. The current timeline, I think, you know, with Ragni loving a vampire, she's kind of grown a bit more in favour of them. Well, and that's definitely going to change in the future. But nothing's really stopped these vampires from joining beforehand. This scene right here, obviously, you know, it's a confrontation with the Jarl of Dawnster, which is under the control of the Empire during the peace treaty, and we get to kind of really get to see Cecilia sort of open up and sort of talk to the Jarl. And I mean, the Jarl knows about her. Probably met her a couple of times when she took over for the Imperials. But I think a lot of the Jarls have learnt the legend of, you know, of the Dark Knight, of a mysterious black armored woman delivering heads, and, you know, spinning her around with the Dragonborns. They kind of know exactly what she is now and all that sort of stuff. And I kind of like the idea that Cecilia doesn't have to, like, you know, use a mortal mask. That, you know, she chooses to walk around the common town because she doesn't want people staring at her or shooting a brick when they see her face. But there's times where she can just show who she is, you know. And I did want to make Cecilia a 200-year-old vampire, but I also wanted to make her very human, very grounded. And we're not meant to live that long, in a certain sense of being a human being. And we all have the natural emotions. No matter if we could live for 200 years, we're still going to somewhat feel human. And she's always been disgusted by the look of in the reflection of this monstrous, pale-skinned, bloodthirsty vampire. And I'll get a bit more of that a bit later on. But this is kind of just the whole, you know, this entire thing was kind of to finally be able to show her face amongst people that weren't part of the Dragonborn story. and also to kind of have deja vu with her time in the Oblivion Crisis, which hopefully one day I'll be able to show with Sky Oblivion in a much different sort of limelight of her story. This bit right here, I really wanted to have like some, just, I don't know, I got bored and I wanted to make a unique outfit, and this is what I did. So I took a character from one of my subscribers from a Discord. He created a character called Sister or something like that. And I really wanted her to feel like, when you saw her face, if you've been with the crew for a long time, you would know who she looks like. And when Cecilia sees it, it's just like her eyes kind of just like, voomp, open up. You see that her eyes just, they go like hunger mode. They just brighten up, and as soon as she sees it, because Cecilia was the very first person on the team to actually meet Ragni with that haircut, and it's like, you're a bit strange that this pale-skinned vampire just comes up to you with her eyes glowing, and you're like, whoa bro, back the fuck up, I don't like this shit one bit. It'd be like a complete stranger coming up to you, but the stranger's a vampire. But this is just deja vu for Ragni, and I like the character. I mean, she's a Cyrodiilic Nord. She's not she's Skyrim born, but just like the chick here, the Jarl, she was actually born in Cyrodiil, but came to Skyrim later on. This one was born in Skyrim and went back to Cyrodiil. She's got 3 kids, all sort of mages and that sort of stuff in Cyrodiil, and she's just visiting an old friend from the Civil War, her commander, which was Brina here. And then came to Skyrim during the worst time to travel. And we get to meet Ignos Silverfire, who, like I said, we get to see her husband a bit later on, but we've seen her husband beforehand. We're sent with, I think, Centaurus' story when he beat Brianna. I think. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure he was in that. This for Cecilia is her favourite time of day. I've said this a couple of times. And then I was becoming the morning, so it'd be the worst time. It'd be the worst time for vampires. It'd be kind of shit because you're losing your power, but she doesn't like what she is, being a vampire, and the returning of the light is something she loves. I mean, you'd expect for Zarita, the favourite time of day would be the sun going down. Different for Cecilia, of course, things like that. And for this, I kind of wanted to deal with not just the 2 vampires that we get to meet in the battle, but also someone else that we got to see a long time ago, Chapter 3, Nightmares, that sort of thing. But we get to meet these 2, and I've had these guys sitting in the databanks for like a year, man. And you've probably seen them a couple of times throughout episodes of a pale-skinned vampire just walked around the inn. That's been them. And they naturally rocked up here without me having to add them, which was pretty bloody cool. Because they're set to follow each other. And I've always had her as kind of like a background character that kind of, I don't know how to really explain it. She's an old vampire, and as we see with this one, she was part of Clan Volkihar, and I didn't even I knew this at the time of her story. I mean, this one right here is kind of a resemblance to Zarita, but a bit more angry, I guess, or a bit more of a pain in the ass to deal with, especially for ancient vampire. But she's trying to create her own little coven and become like a mercenary group in a sort of way where she's paid gold and they've got hunting rights to criminals in the area and things like that. She's trying to be a little more proactive, as in not an enemy of the mortal kind, where bounties that get put on them, but she can hunt bounties and things like that, protect towns during the night, and become an actual service for the people of Skyrim, rather than a problem which puts a bounty on her head. Because regardless if it's a vampire or not, it might come into your town, but it's not a free citizen of Skyrim. It's a dangerous creature. Not a person anymore, it's a creature. And this is kind of how they're treated. They can't just sit down and buy home and live amongst the mortals. They're always going to be seen as an ancient, bloodthirsty creature, instead of a person, or whoever they were. But yeah, we get to sort of meet them real quick and see who they are, and at this time, obviously, Cecilia can smell something familiar about her, and it's very important to why she can smell something familiar, something that kind of represents around Serana, and obviously with even Centaurus, because they're both the same in a certain way. We don't get to see it, but they are both the same. But yeah, she's a very old vampire. Very old indeed. But like I said, she was Clan Volkihar. There's a lot more to that I want to get into the future, but we'll get there when we get there. At the time, like I said, I wanted to make vampire roots. I wanted Cecilia to kind of gather some vampire allies. I didn't know how I was going to go about that, because I still want the story to be hers and Centaurus's, and I don't want there to be background characters floating around all the time. kind of want there to be roots kind of planted but not taken, in a way. And I had no idea what I was going to do with these guys until the very last conversations when I actually figured it out. Like, when I was actually doing the very last conversation, I was thinking to myself, like, do they follow Cecilia? Or do they go back home and think about it and then come back to try and find her later on when they find out what's happened with the Dragonborn? Or this or that? I don't know. I mean, I had no idea what I really wanted to do with them at the time until Cecilia found out what she found out, and then she made her judgment on the way that Cecilia would act, you know. It just made sense to Cecilia to act the way she acted when she found out, you know, who she was and things like that. With this, we get to see some of the Imperial soldiers that had unfortunately died in the battle, and we get to meet old Erendur. He's converted the Tower of Above into a Temple of Mara, I'm pretty sure. It's where some of the soldiers stayed last time, maybe when they were in Dawnstar in the area. And this was the place they went to just before they went back to Solitude, and everything went fucking crazy for my story. And that took a pivot that I didn't expect was going to happen. Like, when I say I planned that to be like a couple of days in the story, I mean it. It's been weeks. A lot of shit's happened. But yeah, we get to meet Erendur again, and who knows, maybe he could even... He says something here where he talks about Vermina's presence being back, and, you know, obviously we know what's happened with the previous episodes, but obviously Cecilia doesn't. So she has sort of reawakened in a certain way. She's taken hold of someone very important to her. And it's not just because she could, because if you have the opportunity to steal a dragon soul, you're going to do it as a Daedric prince, since it's Adric. But again, it's kind of a menacing play on Cecilia, because Cecilia and Freya once destroyed her staff of corruption and killed her cult and destroyed her influence in Skyrim. So it could be some pettiness amongst the Daedric prince that wants to really bully Cecilia for what she's done and going up to someone she deeply cares about, and, well, there's someone else she deeply cares about that is asleep too. So you might even see that. But yes, like, we have a little conversation, and who knows, he could rock up later as a healer follower, or just a battle mate, or like a mage that helps out in the Dragonborn's team later on, things like that. But yeah, it's kind of the consequences of the battle where the companions that she took into Dawnstar died. Quite a few of the Imperial soldiers, and even up ahead we come across the corpses of the commander that vouched for her, the commander that was like, you know, she's the Dark Knight, follow her, she's good, blah blah sort of thing, you know. So we come across his corpse laid out, you know, killed because he was pretty badly injured. He had blood all over him, and he was like trying to hold his guts, and, you know, he got killed pretty much at the start. And as you see on the corner of the mountain there, deja vu, you know, the Oblivion Gates. Obviously Cecilia was in Cyrodiil during this time. But yeah, it's a lot of things coming back to a lot of just clash of who she was, what she became, what she is now, and they're all trying to jumble around in their head. You know, the very human aspect of a character is to make them feel like they're alive. And I think I've done a good job with a lot of these guys where you can feel their pain, you feel it. They're not just some boring-ass NPC. They're a character you can kind of really mould with. And as we see, you know, there's a mix between Cecilia's, you know, youthful days, Dark Knight days, what she is now, and they're all just jumbling in her head, mixing around, that sort of thing. But let's kind of get a little bit further on, and we'll discuss what's happened down the road. As we can see, they've returned back to the fort, and the sun is up, and it looks gross, and a bit of light rain. Yeah, I didn't want it to be serious or anything like that, just a nice bit of drizzle to kind of block out the grossness of the sun. But yeah, this is kind of exciting for me because I really want it to feel like, you know, this is day one of Centaurus' like journey, and Cecilia, like I said, she's bashing in between who she was, who she is, what she is, and like with not being around Ragnar anymore, she feels like she's falling back into place. And it could be a thing when Ragnar's not just a light bringer and a unifier of all these people, but when they get away from her, they kind of fall back into their previous persons, or, you know, what they were beforehand. Could be a thing for Cecilia, who knows? But she kind of, you know, this is going to be day one. So the order is for Zarita to get this lady to safety, and the closest place for that is Whiterun. And this is a day before Con Rackham and Nova get there. I think this is the day they actually leave. No, I don't exactly remember. I think they get here later in the afternoon. No, this is the day before they leave. And obviously they get there pretty early in the day, so Sarita hasn't heard, the couriers probably haven't reached him, or the news of the Dragonborn's near assassination, near death event hasn't really reached him yet. And that's kind of one to want to be really quick with it, because obviously I don't think Sarita's going to be taking this lady all the way to fucking Riften. Like, my god, might as well just throw her out the episodes and have her die somewhere in the middle of the roads. But yeah, it was just kind of to get Sarita out so she could, because, you know, Cecilia's like, I need to train Centaurus, I need to make this motherfucker hard. Maybe the wrong words I used right then. I need to make this guy a proper, you know, badass vampire. I need this guy to deal with what's coming to him. I need to be quick. I need to get back to Ragni's side. I can't have this guy pussyfooting around. You know, she's going to go completely raw dog on him, and I meant those words. You know, she's going to be like, oh, you don't know how to swim, and throws him in the muddy deep end with the crocodile, sort of thing. You know, the sort of Dark Knight kind of resurfacing, her dark demeanour sort of taking back charge when it comes to him, because she needs him to hurry the fuck up and be the vampire that she is, even though she knows it's impossible. But it's kind of, you know, sort of a bit of a downfall. Again, it could be because of the pain, because of the daytime. You know, vampires might feel ill. You know, like they might have like what we have as a cold during the day, where they feel quite ill and gross, and obviously weaker. And it could be, you know, like that. I mean, she is a lady, and they do get quite nothing. You know, obviously you're not going to feel at your best when, you know, you feel like shit, and it's just going to be one of those things where Cecilia's just like, she's willing to throw hands to this guy. She's like, do what you're told or die. And it's a bit of a rough thing, but again, like I said, she's Cecilia, but she's also the Dark Knight, and she doesn't know how to properly train somebody. You know, she does with Sarita, but Sarita was a very special case where she was quite easy to train, where, you know, she's only got she's a feck all time with Centaurus, and he's a disciplined soldier, and, you know, you'd think that he'd be better at this, but again, it's like having someone that's a grown-ass adult, doesn't know how to swim, and throwing in the muddy water in the Northern Territory of Australia. You don't know if they're going to drown, you don't know if they're going to swim, or you don't know if something's going to fucking eat them. Something like that, really. Now, this bit, we can obviously see Centaurus has had a bit of a snack, and the banner hasn't ended up too well. I actually brought this up in my Discord, and my Discord went kind of like at me with like, it's disgusting. You know, vampires aren't cannibals, but again, I mean, vampires have the ability to apparently suck the blood completely out of you, like magically, or, you know, powerfully. I don't know, but it was a battle I didn't really get through, but it's a battle I had to stay on the ground. Like, if you're brand new to being a vampire, you're not going to know how to be a vampire. I mean, you're not going to know where the proper places to suck to get all the blood out. You're going to rip them apart, and you're still going to be using your teeth, because you've been alive for what? Centaurus is like 29 years old. 29 years he's had to eat and consume things. I mean, they don't really need their teeth anymore to get blood. I mean, some of them might still eat humans, the physical aspect of what it felt like to be a human. But again, he's ripped this guy apart, and he's just started eating. You know, he's starting to eat and lick the heart, and, you know, maybe eat some of the flesh. Because this is just what he knows is previously. You know, it's muscle memory. It's human instinct to eat. And it is disgusting. Absolutely, blood made him sick, but he's just completely overridden by instinct of being a vampire. And like I said, he doesn't know exactly where to pinpoint the right vein to get all the blood out. He's bloody, you know, he's just going to rip and tear and devour and stuff like that. And so I want to definitely focus on, you know, the whole, a new vampire not knowing how to exactly properly to vampire sort of thing. And Cecilia's like, yeah, she knew he was going to do this, and even if he wasn't going to do this, she was still going to do exactly what she was going to do, and that was throw him out in the daylight. You know, that was the entire plan. I really liked what I did here. I mean, this is just two pictures that I put together that had the zoom in, zoom out, and it felt like a heartbeat. You know, if I can do something so simple, and if it works, I'm going to do it 100%, you know, 110%. But yeah, we get to see the newer side to Centaurus, and then we get to bully him a little bit, and throw him out into the sun and turn him into a sort of foreskin that's kind of been third degree burned. Comes out during the day, looks into the sky, looks at that, and is grossly just disgusted. I mean, like, he feels physically ill. And it's the same thing that happened to Cecilia when she went out during the daylight, after the night she was turned, when she arrived in Skyrim. Her first day as a vampire was actually in Skyrim. But again, we get to see that the effect of it on Centaurus. He feels ill. Doesn't matter if the sunlight's on him, it's still like, and his eyes are really, like, right here I went for max brightness, and then I added the vampire spell, which is even brighter. And as you can see, it's like, it's blaringly bright. It hurts. And this is kind of the whole leaving the vault thing in Fallout, kind of for a vampire. So his eyes hurt, he feels ill, and again, like, his powers are gone. So he feels like shit, which is kind of the point as the vampire. But yeah, it's kind of Cecilia's, this is a bit of a tough love, where she's like, get over yourself, where, you're going to taste what the sun feels like. Now, as we can see here, the sunlight hasn't engulfed the fort yet, so it's really early morning, the rain has stopped, and the sun is out, but it hasn't engulfed the fort yet. And I didn't really, I tried this a couple of times where there was like sunlight on the path, and Centaurus would walk past it and like be burnt, and he'd feel great pain. But I didn't exactly know how to tell that as a moving story. I mean, so I decided to really go up top, on the top of the battlements, where the sun would come out and we'd get slowly closer to him. But he knows what's going to happen. But at the moment, the mountains are kind of shielding the sun, and he's just got to wait for it. He's out there, he feels like shit. And obviously the fear factor of what's about to happen. He took the arm of the dead guy that he drained, and Cecilia's like, get butt ass naked. So I had to fix up my underpants of SOS to make sure that he could get naked without YouTube cracking the shits. She goes down to grab a bucket of water, giving him another chance to run for it. Giving him that chance to run, because if he runs, he's going to be caught out in the daylight. She's going to track him, she's going to find him, she's going to kill him, and get back to Ragni. And there's a part of her that wants that to happen, but there's also a part of her that doesn't. It's a conflict with the vampire, and obviously who she is and what she's got, and all that sort of very human stuff. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's just, she's gone down to get a bucket of water and a rag for Centaurus to clean himself, and she, as we can see a little bit later, the sun's kind of come out a little bit, it's creaking through, and she's, there's a bit of a, that's like, I hope he's run, but the closer she gets to the location, the more she hopes that he hasn't, and it's just the conflict of her inner self. Is it her that's seeking this? Is it the vampire? Is it both? Is the vampire even a thing, or is she just being a grumpy bitch that she was kind of known for and is kind of known for? It's kind of unknown, but like I said, I mean, during the daytime, these guys are suffering pain in their eyes from the intense brightness, the sun glaring down in their skin, burning it, searing it, and they're not going to be in the best moods during the daytime at all, because again, they're not made for the day, they're made for the night. And the sun, Aetherius, is an Adric thing that punishes anything Daedric, I guess. I mean, does Aetherius also affect Daedra? Because in Oblivion Crisis, right, when you get close to a gate, the sky turns to the Deadlands. So maybe the sun of the Elder Scrolls, Aetherius, isn't just, against vampires, but could be a thing against Daedra, and also werewolves, and anything else influenced by the Daedra? I don't know. I mean, as we see with werewolves, they're a little stronger during the nighttime. So it could very well be a thing where the Adric Aetherius ethereal sun is something that actually, bullies anything Daedra inflicted. But as we see, Centaurus is up here, he's butt-ass naked, covered in blood. And this is just a sort of little area that I wanted to kind of make feel immersive, that he was just, that he was getting ready for his trial by fire, and he was going to get clean, things like that. At this point, Centaurus is also very grumpy and angry because he's out in the sun, and he's kind of got this, feeling in his head that Cecilia is trying to kill him, and he's not quite happy about that, and he's very pissed about that sort of situation, which is rightfully so. And she's had him he's like, fuck you, I will survive this, get absolutely wrecked, now piss off and let me wash myself. And this kind of feels a bit more immersive, so I'm pretty sure she doesn't want to watch him clean his junk, and neither do we. Alright, neither do we. So she stands up, and she just, basically stays by his side while he cleans his bits and all that sort of stuff. And you kind of hear that in the background, and a bit of conversation goes, because she's realizing she's being a bitch, right? That she's bouncing in between Cecilia and the Dark Knight, and she's trying to at least communicate with him, trying to, talk to him as a friend, because there's a friend of the past and there's a pupil of the present, and it's a bit of a conundrum, I guess you could say. But she's, she brings up something. I mean, he says his mother was a whore, and he's not being that as insulting, as in his mother was in fact a prostitute, and he's in a bad mood, so he's not going to say the nicest things. And Celia's like, don't talk about your mother like that. And he basically says, blah blah blah, died when my sister was born, pretty much. And then he tells her what's happened to his sister, and he's like, stop asking stupid questions, I'm trying to get ready for this friggin' son. And just shuts her off. So it's a bit of she's a bit of a bitch to him. She's kind of calmed down a bit, realised what she's like, and he's become a full-on bitch to him. He's become a bitch to her, or a prick to her, whatever words you want to use. And just a bit of give and get, a bit of quad pro quo when it comes to those sort of things. But he's a bit angry because, like I said, to him, Cecilia just sees himself to die. And he turned for the reason to stay in the life, mainly because he didn't want to die. If he's going to die, he's going to do it on the battlefield. At least that's the soldier's dream. And simple fact that he doesn't want to lose Sigund, and he doesn't want to die on his daughter, and he doesn't want to lose Ragnar. So there's a lot of important reasons to stay alive, and the only way to do that was to become a vampire. And that story was born completely out of convincence of like pure improvisation on its own. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of what I really wanted to do with it. Just have that son get closer and closer, to sort of decide to really just physically get close to him, and the whole fear factor of a vampire. I mean, I do have a lot of my guys walking out in the sunlight if their head's revealed as vampires, even with a mortal mask on, but they don't catch full fire, and it's probably because they're not butt-ass naked. And they're kind of used to the sort of pain of the sun burning them. But, like I said, Centaurus is completely naked. He's got no armor to protect 90% of his body. And regardless of Serrano's bloodline, the sun is still the sun, and he's still a vampire. And there's only so much he can deal with before it eventually becomes a very dangerous thing. That'd be a great torture effect in this game, wouldn't it, for like Vampire's Court? That you throw him out of jail during the daylight, and butt-ass naked, and force him to run somewhere. But yeah, this is kind of his trial by combat. This is but a bit of his training. And I didn't know exactly how I was going to do that, how I was going to play, but as we see, this is how it goes. I see there's the sun getting so ever closer to him, right? And then he looks up and kind of sees it blaring over the top of the mountain. And as soon as he bothers to look up, to see how far the sun away is, it's like when it hits him in the face. It's like, boom, right there. You can start to feel it on his skin, and he's physically seeing him burn. So he's actually starting to burn and catch fire, or smoke up with his skin searing, and he right now gets to realise what it is, that it feels like to be a vampire out in the sun. It's not very good. Now, yes, I probably wasted a bit of time as a reader here, but she's a support character with Cecilia, and she's definitely part of his stories, of course. This takes a bit earlier on, when Sigund and that are kind of inside after the rain's pissed off, and she's convinced the lady not to to follow her out during the daylight. She's taken a sword and that sort of stuff. But I kind of really wanted to talk about certain things as Cecilia, as the region, sort of her general views on being a vampire, and even not liking the Imperials. I'm pretty sure I brought that up. But I thought she definitely deserved a bit of her own playtime, because, like I said, she's a supporting character, Cecilia, and I've got some things planned for her. I've got some things planned for her for sure. But yeah, I definitely knew I was wasting a bit of time with this one, but I kind of want to get a bit of a general thought set to kind of update on people on how she thinks, because, like I said, she is the supporting character to Cecilia. She's, Zarita was kidnapped, and her girlfriend was killed by vampires as a sort of result on building an army for Harkon. but she was never introduced into Harkon's army. She was just turned and rescued by Cecilia before she was eventually put into the service of Harkon. But this is obviously the early day, could be like 7, 8, 9 a.m. During the day before the couriers have reached Whiterun, and she's not there for long. I mean, she goes in, she talks to the steward, and this is the time that she'd definitely find out something's happened. But who knows? Maybe it might take a couple hours for them to get from point A to point B, and again, the roads are a lot more dangerous now with it being Draga infested and things like that. But she's obviously beat the courier there, and she's left before he's arrived, sort of thing. But yeah, it's kind of the way that I really want to take the story. As you can see here, the Draga have attacked and set up on this farm, and the guards are still alive. One of them's still alive, but there's an influx of dead Draga, so maybe this is an area they came from first. They sent a small detachment to the farm. It failed, and this is where the other supporting character for Freya actually grew up in this village before she became a companion in a werewolf and things like that. So we kind of go back a bit more to another supporting character. I really like the whole perspective of what I do with the vampires here. During the daytime it looks beautiful, but through their eyes it looks disgusting. And it's really good for roleplay because it immerses you to actually play a vampire properly, a creature of the night. Nighttime is gorgeous to them. They can see everything. Daytime is disgustingly, scorchingly bright. Physically, it hurts. The player. It sucks looking at the sky for me. During the nighttime, it's so gorgeous, but for a mortal, it's absolutely disgusting in the nighttime because I can't see 10 feet in front of me. People don't really like a dark sky, and that's more than fine. But for me, it's immersive. I mean, we're not meant to see at night time. This is a glaring full moon, and I'm not too sure if this game takes place of that, but again, it's something along the lines of that, As you can see here, there's a bunch of Draga corpses that they've even attacked the farms around Whiterun, and they've just chucked them into a pile and lit them on fire. This is actually the day, I think this is the day. I think this is the day they actually leave. I could be wrong. Could be tomorrow. I think it's actually the day after. Because I think right now Tonrak is at least going to Solitude to find out what's just happened. So they arrive the next day. But we'll cut through all the bullshit here. They go in, they have a conversation, but a bit of bounty gold. This wasn't the bit that I really wanted to set up. The bit was leaving the town, or leaving Whiterun. And that was a simple little thing for getting beside the inn, which is something I want to set up later. And if you guys pick this up in the next couple episodes, congratulations, because I'm going to be leaving a lot of clues to what I'm going to be doing in the future with Sarita, and her past, as she's mentioned in her time, in her story, which is ages ago. But there's a reason for what's about to happen. Quick little mention, here he is right here, the husband of the one Cecilia fought with. Yep, he showed up in one of Centaurus' stories before the Dragonborn shit started. That was him right there. Now, what happens down here is a clue to what a bit of a future with. It could even be in the next Tonrak and Minerva episodes, where it's not going to be blatantly obvious, but I will leave clues for people that they can spot the blatant obvious. And I'm sorry about that, but I tried to film this like a million times, and I think I got sick of it, so I just didn't give a fuck that she was sitting on a chair. But what happens to Sarita here is that she kind of goes into kind of like a blood feuding hunger sort of mode, and it starts to act really strange towards her. That she's not even that hungry, but she feels this weird presence from within the inn that makes her bloodthirsty. And this is me trying to do some sort of shitty back and forth camera thing. And she gets a major headache and like a bloodlust over it, and she's like, shit, I gotta leave, I gotta fucking run. And she panics because she doesn't know if she's gonna just latch out and bite somebody, so she just runs. And it's a hint to the inn. It's just a hint. But again, those stories will become a lot more obvious later on, and who knows, in the next ones you might even spot them. So next time we get to Tonrak and Minerva's storyline, keep an eye out, or keep an open mind at least, because you might tangle on what's going on. I'll make it somewhat obvious, but not so blatantly obvious. But yeah, as you can see here, he's kind of closed his eyes. He's trying to manage the pain. I mean, essentially, you're getting cooked. You're putting your hand on a hot surface, and it's cooking. And that's kind of what I imagine this pain to be, and to be absolutely dreadful. And he's cooking, and all of a sudden, Cecilia's watching over him, and he's just lit on fire. And I had to actually edit some textures here, some afflicted textures, because obviously the afflicted textures look diseased. I wanted him to look ashy, so I just gave him a simple, like, blackish texture. So it looks like he's no longer in, like, disease, but more like his skin is literally turning to ash. And you know, he's in immense pain. You know, it comes to a point to where someone's suffering so badly, they just act out in pure self-defense or just a rage that they can't control because they're dying. And this is kind of what happens here with Centaurus. You know, that, you know, he's just in this phase where he's just gotten up and he's attacked Cecilia because he has no idea what's going on. He's in a complete, like, just frenzied mode. And, you know, he's during the daytime, so he can't transform into a beast, or he can't be an absolute dangerous threat, and plus he's getting close to dying. She's like, fuck this, and she pulls the dagger out, you know, the one that inflicted this to him, and just cuts him up, and, you know, and kneels into the floor, and then she kind of calms down. By this time, Zarita's got him back, and she's like, what the shit, what's going on? And she gets up there and finds Cecilia, obviously, standing over the top of him. Sort of, she's not really happy about that. I mean, it's daytime vampires, right? I'm not too happy, but she's like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? And Cecilia gets quite angry at that response, because she's like, how dare you? He attacked me. And they get into a conversation. Obviously, Zarita's cracking the shits at Cecilia for hurting him, trying to get him killed. And you see that with her eyes. She's angry. The silver is lit up, and she's like, how dare you? And she's like, go get his robes right now, dress him, and get him somewhere safer. But Cecilia isn't too happy about, you know, Zarita talking to her like that and blaming her, because at the same time, Cecilia's feeling guilty enough, because she knows it's somewhat true, because the truth does hurt. I mean, she pretty much threw him in the deep end in the middle of the sun, and she knows a lot of the stuff coming out of Zarita's mouth is pretty much just honest. Yeah, that's probably why she's piss rotten mad, because it's just true. As we can see here, he looks a bit, yeah, well done. Looks a bit, he's had a rough go of things. His eyebrows are gone, his hair's gone. He's being cooked, and he looks like shit. But that's kind of the way that I want him to be. At least, he looks bald on this for some reason, but he's not actually meant to be bald. He's meant to have his hair sizzled down to a nice good old 1 or a good old 0.5 for a haircut. And Cecilia's obviously feeling quite guilty for what she's done. She's, you know, she's telling him sorry, and she's agreeing with Zarita and blah blah. And after that, she needs some time to think about stuff and shit like that, because she doesn't want to be around Zarita with that guilty look on her face, and obviously around Centaurus, who she almost killed, who she's greatly regretting. We get to this point where Zarita's just reflecting. Cecilia, right? She's on patrol. She's watching the the surrounding area, and it's just simply just to get away from, from Zarita, because, she obviously deeply cares about Zarita. She really does. I mean, I think Cecilia has to be my most diverse character. Now, I hate diversity because it's always done backwards. People always fuck it up. It's always about their sexual orientation, what fucking pickles their tickle, instead of who they are, where they came from, what they do. They always focus on their gender, their sexuality, and all that sort of shit first, and they've just destroyed the word diversity, in my eyes at least. They fucking butchered it. And even saying the word now makes me feel ill inside. But with Cecilia, diversity is shown much later on when it comes to that she's straight, that she doesn't physically find women attractive, but she sleeps with one. And it's not because it's not because of physical attraction, it's because she's been alive for 200 years and felt like a monster, and someone comes into her life and makes her feel like a beautiful human being, makes her feel like she's someone special. And there are people out there like that, both no doubt men and women, that don't find the physical, and they're going to call it pansexual, some stupid ass fucking name. I don't like to name things like gay, lesbian, or bi. I think those words are stupid. It's just a person likes the same person. But it's for her, it wasn't really a sexual attraction, it was how someone made her feel. So it does obviously fall under the bisexual flag, but it's not the whole physical thing, it's more of the sort of feeling thing. The first person she ever loved was the Holy Crusader, and he made her feel safe and protected and wanted and cared for, and that. And then Zarita comes along 200 plus years later, and again she's able to somewhat feel that someone cares about her, someone loves her, someone thinks the world of her. Someone makes her feel important and special. And like I said, she might be a 200-year-old vampire, but I still want her to feel very human. There's that part of her that's lived for way too long. She starts to forget things, that she starts to become a bit more cruel and, sort of this and that. But there's still that part of her that's still inner human like the rest of us. And in a way, she's become her own crusader. She fell in love with the crusader. When he disappeared, I guess she took the mantle. To crusade against the Daedra, to crusade against evil, to crusade against the horrible bandits, and she became the crusader of the night in a way. She pretty much followed in his example in a way. So I guess the champion of Cyrodiil is somewhat still here in Skyrim's story through her, because she's kind of taken his place, but as a nighttime crusader. And this is just her time to really reflect on the storm and just to kind of think about what she's done, who she is, and she does talk about a vampire that owned the home. I think I've only ever brought that up a couple of times in the story, which is the Creation Club home, which is, I always like to add some cool things to lore and stuff like that. Hopefully, if you ever play Elder Scrolls Online, you know who I'm talking about, but we'll discover that in the next episode of who this vampire was that owned her home, that talks about the vestige that Centaurus could be very interested in, because Centaurus believes the vestige was the founder of Imperial Vanguard. One of my Elder Scrolls Online character called Centaurus Tharn. Things like that. So we get to see a few diaries and a few journals and kind of maybe put a sort of an end to a certain character's story in the Elder Scrolls Online. Because he shows up in the territory of the Daggerfall Covenant, and then he shows up in the Skyrim DLC of the West sort of thing. But anyway, that's just some ideas for that. Obviously, if you've played Elder Scrolls Online, you know what I'm talking about. But I've always liked the idea of his faction in Elder Scrolls Online and how I could implement that into Skyrim. And Cecilia's kind of been that character in my foresight that could do that. And being able to actually link him up, that gave me a rock solid hard on. But it's one of those things where it'd be exciting for the next episode. I'm really excited to tell that, but I'm going to put a poll up for the next story. Either Ragni, Tonrak, or again Cecilia and Centaurus and that sort of stuff. So I'll leave a poll up. If you got who you want to see next, do you want us to get back to Ragni? Do you want to continue here? Do you want to go to Tonrak? Let me know in these comments, and I'll put the poll up, and you can definitely chuck it in there and stuff like that. But we finally get to meet the vampire. That basically Cecilia asks to meet her at night, and then Cecilia's like, it's not night. She gets chewed up by this vampire. This is pretty much Cecilia, but a lot older, and she's like, wow, so this is what it feels like. And again, she likes the idea of these other vampires out there doing what she's done, and she has sort of a test to see if they're worthy to follow Ragni. And I was like, I still didn't figure out at this point, like, would they eventually follow Ragni? Will they end up in the story? Still unknown. Could do. Once she finds out what's happened, she might try and go and tell Cecilia what's happened. Won't find her. And then go to basically Solitude to try and lend her a hand, even though there's a high risk of her association with the Dragonborn's past. Things like that. I don't know exactly, but the test was to basically see their skill level, see if they were competent fighters, to see if they weren't bloodthirsty monsters just ripping everything apart around them, and to see if they could follow simple orders. And also questions, because obviously Cecilia's a bit suspicious on this one, because she smelt very sort of ancient and powerful, a bit like Centaurus does. And the fact that Cecilia blurts out Serana's name, and this chick's face opens up like a fucking lantern on fire. And Cecilia knows there's something there. But the way Cecilia thinks about it is that this is a remnant of the Volkia clan after they got butchered, which is true, but also not true. I don't want to reveal too much, but yes, in Cecilia's mind, she thinks this is one of the vampires that escaped the slaughter of Clan Volkihar. It's kind of true, kind of not. We'll figure that out a lot later on. Now, this bit, we have Cecilia going to basically tell the reader and Centaurus what's happening. She's also, comes to terms that she's kind of been the bad guy, that she's been an unnecessary arsehole and a danger to both her mission with Centaurus for Ragni. you know, and also she's here to talk to Zarita. Now she tells Zarita what she's doing, and Zarita cracks the shit. She's like, what do you mean you're not taking me with you? And Zarita thinks this is punishment for basically speaking her mind of what she did against Centaurus. And again, she was right to say that, and Cecilia knows this, but it's not to punish her, it's because she needs someone around Centaurus at this time. Well, she's just pulled on him, someone who's kind, someone that can mold him a lot better. She's a 200-year-old vampire. She has no idea what it means to be like immortal anymore. If she cured herself and became immortal, she'd probably die in the first 2 days. You know, and she needs Zarita here watching over him, and Zarita kind of cracks the shits, and Cecilia really shows her heart right here. She's like, you're right, I'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. Please just stay here with him. And, you know, Zarita was about to crack the shits, and Cecilia touches her hand, and, you know, it's back to, you know, the whole emotional thing. And Centaurus is like, man, what the fuck's going on here? This is so weird. Stuck in someone else's emotional relationship because he knows they sleep together. You know, Zarita revealed that in the first episode, and they both just chew him up. They get up him, and he's like, man, it was, you know, it was less painful burning out in the sun than being here, you know. And Cecilia's like, you keep that shit up, boy, and you're gonna be not worrying about the sun anymore. They get back to an emotional little thing, and like I said about Cecilia, she doesn't know what the hell she wants. She's heads all over the fucking place. You know, one moment she's this loving, caring, you know, woman around when they're naked, and then all of a sudden she's this hard-ass vampire pupil trainer again. And, you know, like I said, Cecilia doesn't, you know, she had this person come into her life that's, you know, that was, you know, vampire, and, you know, someone that she was training, someone that made her feel human, someone that made her feel wanted and somewhat beautiful, and she fell victim to her own desire to be very human, to want to feel love, and she hasn't felt that in a very, very, very long time, you know. And then to have someone come into your life and just do that after a very fucking long couple centuries, you know, it's gonna change things for you. And she fell prey to her own desires, of course. I don't think Cecilia is necessarily straight. I mean, she falls in love with the right person, and I think she knows this time that she does obviously love Zarita, but she also fights against it because she believes she's straight. No, it's just the whole. It's a lot of guilt, you know, for Zarita. She's meant to be a trainer, but at this current time, with vampires being able to be cured with Ragni, that she feels guilt that she's keeping her as a vampire to be around her, rather than she wants her to be cured and grow old and fall in love and marry the woman she loves. And, you know, the conflict of that she shouldn't be here with her, shouldn't be stuck as a vampire living the same life that Cecilia's had to live, that she deserves better. So there's a lot of that with Zarita. She does love her. I definitely believe she loves her. But also that she feels immense guilt that she took advantage of Zarita, even though Zarita probably took advantage of her. And it's, you know, the fact that she thinks she wants her to live a life that isn't a bloodthirsty, immortal one. So there's a lot of conflict there. And Centaurus is like, bro, she loves you. And Zarita's like, no, she doesn't like women. And Centaurus is like, dude, I fell in love with the person I thought I'd never fall in love with. She loves you. Plus, you know, she's not really straight if she's muff diving on the ladies, you know? It's like, it doesn't make any sense. You can say you're straight, but as soon as a dude goes and bumps another dude, yeah, you can say as much as you want, it just doesn't work anymore. You know, it's quite simple. It's like snow not being cold. It makes no sense. And I wouldn't actually really know that, to be honest with you, because I've never touched snow in my life. Never even seen it with my own eyes. But even I know it's cold. But yeah, he's cracking up, having a laugh. He's like, bro, she loves you. And that could put a bit of a hope into Zarita, you know, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But I think it's a bit of an emotional fruit, you know, a bit of an emotional hula hoop with Cecilia trying to manage all this shit, trying to put straight what's this and what's that, and it just doesn't exactly work for her. She's bouncing between the triangle. But yeah, we get into another combat scene with, you know, we've had 3 in this one, so it was action-packed this episode. This was kind of the spare no one. This is to make sure the silver doesn't stay in the bandit's hand, to make sure the silver hand are dead because of Freya. You know, she doesn't want anyone being a threat to Freya, especially since Freya is out of action right now, wounded and mortal. She can't have any remnants of the silver hand finding out where she is. and hurting her. So this is kind of a clear the silver out because it's a risk to them and anyone else. But it's also to make sure the Silverhand are properly dead, because they were more bandits than they were hunters. Which is kind of weird, because the Silverhand are meant to be the remnants or the sort of outcasts of the companions that they were like Ysgramor's legacy, but instead of being honourable companions, they became bloodthirsty bandits. So they kind of went in the path of Ysgramor, but then diverted from that exactly, which is freaking stupid. But I guess that's kind of what happens with what's the face. I was messing around with some Vampire Lord armor. Right, I really wanted to test it because I want to make some for Centaurus, for the armor he's going to be wearing. We've all seen it in the post. And I want to make some Vampire Lord armor for him. And so I actually tested on her, because him and her are exactly the same in a certain way. But yeah, so I'll show you that real quick. Here we are right here. So I made this for her because, like I said, she's ancient and there's a lot of story in between that, which I haven't yet gone into. I wanted to really mess around and make my own Vampire Lord armors, and I figured out how to, because I need to upgrade Centaurus when he finds his armor. I want to add his armor to his Vampire Lord. But yeah, this is kind of what I was going for with this. It being able to create Vampire Lord armor. I just decided to see if I could actually get Skyrim's armors to work from the human to Vampire Lord, and it actually worked, which I'm actually quite happy about. So expect the next episode of Centaurus to actually see him wearing the armor that he's wearing on his humanoid will be also mirrored to his Vampire Lord. I've also downloaded a new mod called Monster Lip Sync, I think it's called, which allows the monsters to actually, they're meant to be able to turn their heads and look at you like that, but they don't this one, but their mouth does move when you talk to them, which is pretty cool. I'll either keep it or I won't, I don't know exactly yet, but yeah, I don't know, but I just really wanted to. She was a test run to see if I could make armor for Centaurus for when he becomes a Vampire Lord, and it worked. Now you get to a point here where we find a lady, she's caged inside of a cage. She willingly put herself there, with weapons drawn so the bandits couldn't get to her, because bandits, they're not very great people. They do horrible things to young ladies, and she's in here hiding from them, and she kind of, bandits are just killed, and all of a sudden you find they're bloody vampires. And she's wearing silver armor. I mean, she's obviously come here because she's heard about the Silverhand, and somehow she's found out where they're operated or where their new base is. And I like to build, I wanted the Silverhand to be like a sort of a Breton guild that moved over to Skyrim, but I normally see the Silverhand as outcasted companions that didn't want to become werewolves. They were like Ysgramor's legacy companions compared to sort of Daedric companions that you meet in Skyrim. But yeah, it's a bit of a conversation between here to where it's she tells him why she wants to join the Silverhand, and then she tells Cecilia, and Cecilia sees a moment of her past at the Daedra, and kind of understands why. And then, they're fine, whatever. They have a bit of a conversation, which leads to eventually this lady revealing that there's a Frostar, another friend she came with, further down that could be alive, and she's like, please don't kill him when you're going to clear everybody out. And Cecilia's like, if he points that silver in my direction, I'm going to put him down. She's not going to take the risk, because silver could kill her and turn her to ash. So it was straight up that way. But again, we're going to get to a point to where I'll skip through all this, and when we get to go and meet our young Frostar. For this one, I kind of really wanted to kind of have Cecilia kind of recognise who she was, and that she was once one of these people, but then taking in the daughter of a werewolf, kind of changed her aspect on life, because this is her, as a vampire, then this is her as a mother, raising little Freya. And she kind of looks back and sees herself as these people, but also as the new person she is, that if anyone ever hurt Freya, that she would butcher absolutely everybody and anybody involved with hurting her or anything like that. I mean, at the moment, Freya is wounded in Morthal, forced to sleep, and she's very obviously mindful of that. It doesn't want to see a place which reminds of torture and pain of her daughter and things like that. It's going to be heavy on her mind, especially with everything going on. Now, I thought about this moment, and I really kind of liked it, so I went and made a brand new version of the chick that was standing there, and I really wanted to kind of introduce an armor that's very similar to us for Cecilia fans. She kind of meets a man wearing her armor, but it's modified with the silver hand version of it. And she looks into his eyes, and she sees the exact same eyes as Freya. And it's like, what the fuck? Why is there a pure-born werewolf wanting to hunt and kill werewolves? Maybe that might be explained in the coming episodes. But like, seeing one of them turn on their own people, man, like some horrible shit would have had to happen. And she's like so surprised. I mean, she thinks to herself, Freya would just behead this motherfucker for hunting their own kind. But she can't do that because when she looks into his eyes, all she sees is Freya. And obviously he's killed a lot of the bandits here and butchered them, but he's also been wounded and that sort of thing. And she's like, bro, even as a werewolf, you wouldn't stand a chance against me, let alone both of us, because of what she is. And once he names the girl that he was with, basically Cecilia disarms and goes, listen, she's safe, she's okay, we're not going to hurt you. And I mean, he's hearing that the person he's with is safe because they're close, and that the vampires are putting away the weapons. He's kind of feeling that degrade of like, okay, I don't have to fight anymore, I don't have to kill anybody, I don't have to do anything. And he's bleeding out and he's injured, and so he's like, either way I'm dead. I fight, I might die. I don't, I probably die. But the probably is a lot better than a definite, sort of thing like that. So basically, she's brought him back to the girl. She's opened the cage. Cecilia's like, I can patch him up, give me your weapons, give me the keys, and I'll look after him. And it's also there as a sort of training testament later on for Centaurus to learn how to be around mortals, because bloodlust and sun damage are very important things, but he needs to learn how to tolerate being around them, to censor out their heartbeats, to walk amongst them, because if he can't do that, he's as good as dead. But also to have the anti-repellent of like that guy. It'd be like a really handsome dude going on a date with a girl. He looks absolutely gorgeous, but then he sits down, he just smells like shit. It's kind of that. It's like, oh, he's good looking, but he smells gross. So it's kind of that thing for Centaurus, where it's going to be like a good thing and a bad thing. This conversation that I get to right here, I didn't figure it out until I actually got to the point. Oh wait, not even there yet. Oh my god, she's just picking up. She's just picking up healing potions for him later on. So when she goes back to him, he'll have healing potions to help him out. I actually got up here and I made some new assets from previous assets from mods, from those cool potion mods. I found that the meshes actually had like blood meshes inside of them, and the lids were separate, so I was able to take the lid off and take the blood out and have actual empty glass bottles, which looks sick. I don't know why that's not a mod. Like, why didn't they add the empty glass bottles just for like static decoration? Because they act like empty bottles of beer and wine in the game, so they can be dropped and have the glass sound and that sort of thing. And it could be a damn cool mod with that, where you can find empty glass bottles in like vampire ruins and use those to fill up blood vials and stuff like that. But there's probably a mod that does that with like empty glass bottles. You'll be able to like get blood potions and shit like that. Even mods that do that without needing empty glasses. But here we are. We're getting to the point now where I didn't figure out what I was going to do with these two vampires, because obviously, like I said beforehand, I wanted to build roots. Like, she's able to find companions and allies amongst her journey, like Tonorak and Minerva will and other things like that. I didn't actually know how to go about this quest line, because I still wanted this to be Centaurus and Cecilia's and Sarita's story. I didn't want them to have like a flagship of followers at the end of it. I need this to be kind of off the grid. And like I said, Hilda and her friend have a contract, a job with the Jarl and things like that, and they can't really be uprooted because, like I said, this Holder chick, she's got other vampires in the background that she's managing, and she can't just disappear and organise them while she's pissed off into the blue. So it didn't make much sense for her to just go, oh yeah, I'll follow you, I'll help you out, blah blah blah. But again, she asks us how she does, and Cecilia goes, yeah mate, you did pretty good. Yeah, I thought you were pretty good. You weren't blood fiends, you weren't bloodthirsty crazy monsters, and you're quite adequate, but I've got some questions. And then she's like, yes, how old am I, how many have I killed, blah blah blah. She says that she was, the right hand of a powerful vampire lord. She's killed thousands, but innocent and not, and she's very old. And Cecilia kind of put those together already, that she thought she was with the Volkir family bloodline, which she is. It's not exactly how Cecilia thinks it is, though. That's for a later date. Probably. Definitely. But Cecilia makes it, and I went off what Cecilia would do in this situation, because Cecilia has always been very adamant on the security of Ragni. She's very sort of, if she's not there, she's still there. She's nearby, watching over Ragni some way or another. And she's ordered away. But she's very adamant on the security. And, once she basically outs her for being a Volkihar clan member, and she admits to it, Cecilia's like, I'm sorry, but I can't take you. Because she's the one that destroyed your clan, and there's a good chance you know about that. There's a good chance why you haven't joined, because you're a Volkihar survivor, and you no doubt fear for your safety that you could be annihilated if you are found out to be Volkihar bloodline vampire. Even though she's tolerant to vampires, and she's fallen in love with one of the daughter of the Volkihar clan members, royalty, it's still, others might not be seen the same way. And so she can't have that risk of that this could be a ploy to get close to the Dragonborn, to his act of vengeance on killing her friend. But Cecilia, she says that she won't kill him, even though she might not stand a chance against him. She said she won't kill him because what they're already doing benefits the Dragonborn, benefits Skyrim. There's worthy warriors at night guarding this town. It's something that is really needed among Skyrim. There's worthy warriors to protect these settlements, these cities, these towns, these whatever, against Draga. They need volunteers to help them fight, but they've got Imperial soldiers and Stormcloak soldiers and volunteers. But what they need a lot of is people out there protecting against the hordes of the undead and against dragon attacks and things like that. And even at this point, basically, she's like, yep, fair enough. I don't really want to mess up what I've already got. And she even gives Cecilia a compliment after she insults her by calling her vampiric mutt, because Cecilia's just a common vampire. She's just she's affected by a common strain of vampirism. Just another low form of the Cyrodiilic vampires. And she's obviously not. So there's that there. And Cecilia's like, bit of an insult laced with a compliment. Rightio. But again, it doesn't go any hostile. Cecilia still wants them out there doing what they're doing because it's a benefit to Skyrim, and obviously what the Dragonborn kind of wants out there. But like she said, she can't risk the security of Ragni by having a Volkir clan member, but she knows to be close to the clan members. She can't risk it because in Cecilia's mind, she's a survivor of the onslaught of Clan Volkihar. Also, if you look up top there, I did mess this up because I didn't know he was actually there. There's an Imperial soldier that I was trying to clean them all out and send them back to where their locations were, so in the next character I don't have them following the next character. But yeah, there he is. He's up there hiding away, but untrainable on the common eye. But yeah, so this is kind of where I thought I'd leave the series because of this episode, because my god, I went for way too long. It goes around the time the old Journeys to the Dragonborns went for, but I thought it was okay now to put this story to end at this spot and to continue it another day. The next one will no doubt take place straight after this, but it will go into a bit of a time jump. It will lead, from this point on, from Cecilia going back to the fort and then going somewhere else, and then maybe a time jump for a week, and hopefully I can figure those out for the other characters and they're appropriate for them. But I do need to obviously wake the Dragonborn up and get this sort of dragon cult problem infused with the other characters. So much shit going on, but I hope you guys have enjoyed this little background information on what goes through my head making these. And I'll catch you in another video. Look after yourselves, okay? Do not burn your fucking house down, okay, you psychos. Look after yourselves so you can make it to the next episode. Other than that, I'm out of here. Peace.